Shalom, peace and blessings. Almighty Father, I ask that you guide my tongue, guide my heart, guide my mind to be in alignment with your will. Heavenly Father, reduce me and increase, Heavenly Father, in me, in Jesus' name. All right, on 313, which is the date and also the area code I'm from, we want to dispel a couple of things, a few myths about Detroit. And we're going to make this quick. This is going to be a little lightweight jamming for y'all one time. And it's relevant to the times because we are in the throes of the chaos that the New World Order prescribes to when they use the axiom ordo ab chaos, which means order out of chaos. And they do believe in creating chaos in order to construct conditions. It's a problem reaction solution technique, but they create chaos in order to construct the conditions that will lead to martial law. And Detroit, Michigan is one of those places that that chaos has been stirred for some time, and we've seen certain hints that Detroit is one of those places, like many major cities, that will undergo martial law incrementally, and they're giving good reason as to why. And of course, when economic situations create increased violence and crime runs amok, the need for police appears to increase. And this is something that's exemplified by the remake also of a science fiction movie called RoboCop. RoboCop was a movie that was all about martial law in the future. I remember when I saw the original RoboCop growing up, I was fascinated because it was set in my hometown, and I thought it was really neat. And a little did I know at that time the occult goings on that were being depicted and planned even by that movie. And of course it has a transhumanist edge to it, the whole philosophy of mankind merging with machine, which is a blasphemous idea. And I know that a lot of people think that, well, you know, it's just technology moving forward and that's all good, but we have to remember also where technology comes from. And if we are believers of Scripture, and if we take the ancient writings as a whole to heart, we understand some things even from the Hindu writings of the Vedas, and of course from some of the extra biblical writings like the book of Enoch and the book of Joshua. We know that the fallen angels brought technology down to mankind. This is even exemplified on your Apple computers by the Apple logo itself, which is symbolic of the knowledge of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and also the tree on the temple in boot. But that, of course, we know that in the story of Genesis there is no apple, so it is just simply a symbolic thing, but it does indeed symbolize the alignment of technology with the Luciferian system. And some of us are just a little ignorant of that. We choose to ignore that because the technology can be fun, and we live in a society where we are conditioned to believe that we need so many different forms of technology, when of course we know our grandparents and our great-grandparents, our forebears, lived very robust and full lives without such intrusions. And they are indeed intrusions because most of these technologies operate off of some sort of power of the air. And we know in Ephesians 2:2, one of the names of the adversary, who is forever on his job, even when we choose to ignore him, he's forever on his job, and he's called many names, and one of those names is the prince of the power of the air. And you know, your cell phones, your Wi-Fi, a variety of technology is cable satellite is transmitted through the air. And it's interesting, Sat Elite, the elite of Saturn, perhaps, Set Elite, even the Egyptian term for the devil being Set. But again, we wanted to look at Detroit because Detroit is a city that was once the bastion, the center of technology in New Babylon. And we like to term America with the triple K as New Babylon because it is indeed the leading nation in the worldwide Babylon system. It's a worldwide system, the New World Order. And no, America is not the lone culprit. However, they're the big dogs. And so, what's the motor of the big dogs? Each major city in New Babylon has its part to play. And the role that Detroit, Michigan played for some time was that of the motor of the machine that is New Babylon. And it is interesting that when the chaos to order play is run, the first part of the machine to catch significant damage was the motor. Well, if you want to break a machine down, you definitely want to jam up the engine. And Detroit, the area code is 313. And as I look at this now and begin to put some other things together, we can deduce that area codes are not given by happenstance. These devils, these megalomaniacs, the elites who run things, quote unquote, or who think they run things, they really ain't running nothing but their mouth. They put together numerological magic and witchcraft all around us, just as they put together sigil magic, which is magic using symbols and pictures all around us with the logos and whatnot on different products. But we can look at the numbers oftentimes, and we can glean certain things. And even in area codes, 3 plus 1 plus 3 equals 7. And 7 is the number of completion. Now, that in and of itself wouldn't be very significant, but then when you add that to some other things, and let's look at one thing off rip. There was a program on Channel 7 in Detroit, as a matter of fact, ABC, and it was called Detroit 187. And 187 is the penal code in California for murder. And a lot of people equated 187 with murder simply because of Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg's song 187 on an undercover car. But if you do the numerology behind 1, 8, and 7, even 1 plus 8 is 9, and 9 and 7 is 16, and you know to get numerology properly overstood, you need to get down to a single digit. So you turn the 16 to 1 plus 6, and that is 7 also. So ironically, 187 means 7, which means completion. And death is certainly the completion of life. Now, is it not? So when they called Detroit 187, when they called the show Detroit 187, I found it rather dubious because I knew, I said, well, that's not necessarily our penal code. I can't tell you what the penal code is for murder in Detroit. I'm sure somebody will be able to find that and drop that in the comments real fast for us. But the point is this. It was a Disney production. And Disney, we know, is steeped in Luciferian philosophies. Walt Disney himself was an occultist. It's been proven. He was also an accused pedophile. And that accusation is not lightweight. There was lots of evidence to that effect, and you might want to do some research on that. But even if you just take a look at his Oscar award-winning movie, which was called Fantasia, okay, in that movie, it ends with Mickey Mouse doing a conjuring scene with a pentagram staff wand, magic wand, and conjuring up many spirits until he finally reaches the level of conjuring up the devil. And this is in a Disney production. But again, Disney had many accusations by Christian groups over the years of dealing in devilment. And they've been caught many times putting subliminal messages in children's cartoons. They've been caught putting sexual imagery in children's cartoons. And even on the cover of the Aladdin movie there, you can find a phallic symbol hidden amongst the gold towers on the cover of that movie. And many people know about in the Lion King, one of the scenes when the lion, I think it was Mustafa, was on the cliff and he laid down and kind of collapsed himself in a sigh, and when he blew some dandelions, and the dandelion smoke formed the word sex. Now, it's funny when people hear these things without looking at them themselves, which is why some people say, well, why don't you show pictures? Well, it's twofold reasons. One is, if you really want to know, go find out for yourself. And then secondly, these things are so well documented by others that it would be redundant of me to show you something that you could easily find on your own. This is a real-time exercise, and I'm to point things out to you, and you are to check them out for yourself. But indeed, Disney has been shown time and time again putting things like sex subliminals all throughout their cartoons. And in The Lion King, you have that example among many, many others. But Disney put out Detroit 187. And it was to help create in the minds of people more reason to think ill of Detroit. But even more importantly than that, when Detroit would take the fall that it took, it was to help give evidence that, hey, well, it's wild there, or the people are out of control, or they're deserving on some level. That's how a lot of people think, and unfortunately, we know left wing, right wing, same bird, same demonic bird. However, you have people from the right wing and Republican or red states, and just people from certain communities who have a belief that, well, yeah, those Negroes did it to themselves there. And even a lot of people in Detroit, I found myself shocked and surprised at how many brothers and sisters I would hear say, well, I can't wait for them to put some white folks in office. And again, we know that it's not about white or black. That is part of the Masonic chessboard game. Why they use the chessboard imagery so often in their symbolism is because they know it's a game, black and white, and that in reality there's an unseen hand, and it's a green hand that's really moving things around and keeping black and white at odds. Another thing that the 8 Mile movie was used to do, but I digress. Let's go back a little bit more to Detroit 187 ritual. So Detroit 187 came and went very quickly. People in Detroit was kind of geeked about it because they actually were shooting in the city, and I knew people whose friends and family had gotten cameos, in the movie, in the program. And so there was a little buzz going on. And I believe it lasted 1 season, 2 at the max. But when programs do that, you have to realize that's never by happenstance either. A program is to help program the minds of the people toward a certain idea. Once that idea is released, they can stop that program and run another. Just like a computer program. And that program was uploaded into the public consciousness. A lot of people saw it. They overstood, well, hey, Detroit is wild and lawless. And so then what did you have following that? Well, you had the character execution of Kwame Kilpatrick, the former mayor who was from there, and who did a lot of things to try to protect the citizens, the actual people who lived there, because he actually came from there himself. And there's something about when a man comes from the village that he rules versus when a man comes from another village to rule, and he had to be ousted. And this is even exemplified in the RoboCop movies, RoboCop 2. So in the Detroit 187 show, you were programmed, they call it premonition programming. You were programmed to expect something that was coming down the pipeline, something to come. And what was to come was the death of Detroit. Detroit 187, murder. Murder Detroit, if you read it the proper way, which is from right to left. Everything starts on the right and moves to the left. You look people in the right eye, you lead with your right foot, you shake with your right hand. Right comes first. Correct is right. And the right eye is the correct eye or correct self. You look somebody in the left eye, if you think I'm playing, test it out. But, you have 2 eyes and 1 focus. But I digress. So when we saw Detroit 187, the program, it was really a premonition program for Detroit 187, the ritual, which was the ritual to Detroit murder, or murder Detroit. And it was a symbolic murdering, just like in the Masonic ritual. It's a symbolic murdering that you go through when they lay you down into the casket. It's part of the chaos to order, or the rebirth ritual. And ironically, Detroit is known not only as the Motor City or Motown, but it's known as the Renaissance City. And Renaissance is a French word that means rebirth. The Renaissance itself is, of course, heavily steeped and tied to Masonry. And this is why emblazoned at the top of the building you have the GM, which stands for Grand Master in Masonry. And of course, we look at it as General Motors, and we know that back in the wartime, when my grandmother and the elders used to get jobs in the plant, during wartime, the plants were used to build tanks, and it was called, or known as, government motors at that time. People called it that, GM. So, and of course, we know we have a Masonic government. And in Masonic ritual, it is a big deal to do the death to rebirth ritual. It is the death of the old man, or the death of the old world order, and then the rebirth of the new man, or the rebirth of the new world order. And so Detroit, being an old world city, and the city tied and connected to industry, and the old ways of industry, the Iron Age, the Industrial Age that we knew about, that produced cars and factories and whatnot, is becoming a thing of the past. And we're now moving into a new world where technology will be the bread and butter of New Babylon, of the Babylon world mystery system. And so Detroit had to be symbolically done away with, or symbolically killed and then brought back to life, the same way that they do in the Masonic ritual. So you saw a giant Masonic ritual go on over a city, believe it or not, an entire city. And this is a city off the water, and a border city, and ironically a city that Aleister Crowley called the Aeon of Horus. He said that Detroit would be the age of Horus. It would represent the age of Horus. And who is Horus? In the Egyptian pantheon of so-called gods, Horus is the sun. Osiris, Osset, or Isis, and Heru, or Horus. And that's the father, the mother, and the son of the Egyptian trinity. And of course, we know that the enemy does a counterfeiting thing concerning the things of the Most High. Unfortunately, you have many who would believe that that the falsehood came before the reality, and a lot of folks say that the Trinity that you find in so-called quote-unquote Christianity is really bitten from the Egyptian Trinity, when in reality we know that cannot be true, because God was and always is the same way from the very beginning. But what it is that we have academics and scholars whose job it is to, if you do your research by books, and that's the proof of truth to you, their job is to lead you down a certain line to where it will look as if you trust academia and scholarship, it will look as if it first happened in Egypt, and then later on down the line, the Nicene Council and Constantine and all the rest of them came up with these concepts, and they took them all from ancient Egypt. And of course, everything that was done in ancient Egypt was done with the guidance of the fallen angels, the Nephilim, known in Hebrew, in Egyptian, the Neteru, which is where you get the word natural from, Neteru, in nature. And they worship, those who worship nature, witchcraft practitioners worship nature, they worship the Neteru. And this is why oftentimes you will see people who deal with witchcraft wearing some of the same things as people who deal with Egyptian mystery systems, because they do indeed come from the same source, which is Azazel, Halal, Shaitan, the evil one, the adversary, whose job it is to confuse you. So of course, if you believe, if you trust in horses and chariots, if you believe in academia as the proof of truth, then you will be led along that line. because academia is guided by Luciferian brotherhoods. How do we know that? Why? Well, because in order for someone to be an academic scholar, you're going to have to be involved with a university. And a university is going to be run by philanthropists who by and large come from elite families, and fraternities and sororities, which are the feeding ground, the minor leagues, if you will, the farm leagues for the major leagues, which is the Masonry, the Freemasons of the Illuminati. So we found more evidence of this as we look deeper into it. They Live. In the movie They Live, you have Keith David and Roddy Piper, who represent two working men. Again, the old world order, working in the industrial fields. And Keith David and Roddy Piper are led along an adventure where they discover that little do they know that the world that they live in is run by a secret society of unhuman or part human beings. And in the midst of this adventure, in one scene you have Roddy Piper and Keith David sitting down having lunch together, and this is where they first really come to a meeting of the minds and form their friendship bond. And so they're telling each other about one another, and they're both glad to get work. This is set sometime in the future. It's a John Carpenter movie, and he was indeed a futurist. He put a lot of things in his movies about things demonic and things to come in the future. And as they sat together at lunch, Keith David began to tell his story to Roddy Piper. He said, yeah, man, I came from Detroit. He said, yeah, they shut all of the steel mills down. Now, this movie came out in 89, 90, in the early 90s, late 80s. But the point is, it came out before the factories were shut down in Detroit. And when it came out, I thought it was odd what Keith David was saying when I was a kid watching this movie. You know, that he came from Detroit and that the steel mills were shut down. First of all, steel mills are notorious for Pittsburgh, not for Detroit. But it was a way for John Carpenter to slick side say that in the future, which is when the movie is set, the factories would be shut down. And it would cause people to have to go far and wide to search for work, because the movie was not set in Detroit. But Keith David made it a point to say that's where he came from, and he left there because the factories had been shut down. So that was a futuristic or a premonition programming scene in that particular movie. Okay, again, we talk about Transformers. Transformers was shot in Detroit, which was odd. It was not set in Detroit either. So when a movie is shot somewhere but not set there, and we're talking about somewhere like Detroit, not a place known for its glamour and glitz, you have to be dubious and wise as serpents to try to glean what is they trying to say. What's the purpose for that? You say, oh well, it's cheaper to shoot in Detroit. Please. Let's not. Oh, you simple ones, how you love simplicity. The simple answer ain't never the answer. When we're talking about secret societies, they do things layer upon layer upon layer, and they're betting on all you're going to see is the top layer of things. That's their bet. They'll bet that you won't peel that onion back and see that there's another layer of skin and yet another layer beneath that. They'll bet that once you get that top layer off, you'll think that you did something, and you ain't did nothing. So the movie Transformers, I thought it was ill. I said, okay, so they shot it in Detroit, but it's not supposed to be in Detroit. Yet when you watch the fight scene, the big fight scene with Tyrese and the Special Forces Ops guys is fighting against these giant Nephilim machines. Again, technology coming from outer space, giants at that, at war with one another, a light side and a dark side, or a good side and a bad side. Autobots and Decepticons, okay, Decepticons. The fact that these are beings from the heavens who are able to deceive mankind by looking like things that belong on Earth. And in the fight scene, they were in downtown Detroit. Now, of course, there's always a cover story for those of you that they believe won't look past the top layer of the onion. And then the cover story was, oh, well, Detroit has all the old Gothic buildings downtown, and it's cheaper to shoot there than New York, where they have Gothic buildings too of that old style. But it's cheaper there, so we're going to shoot it there. No, no, no. It was symbolic of the fact that Detroit is the place where cars is made. Okay, and these are fallen angel representations. The Transformers are, and they are cars. So this was a way to connect technology to the fallen angels. The fallen angels bringing down the technology that creates computers and cars. Computers, as evidenced by Steve Jobs and Steve W. putting the Apple on their joint. And then in the first advertisements for Apple Computer, the price was $666. Look it up. Now, when they were fighting in downtown Detroit in the big fight scene, they were showing street signs. And me and some of the brothers was watching, and we was peeping at the street signs like, oh, wow, they really wow, they really downtown. And it was puzzling to me why they showed the street signs the way they did. Every shot, every scene in a movie costs money. There's no willy-nilly shot. When they take a particular shot of something and they freeze on it for a moment, like in the film Rosemary's Baby when they froze on the Pall Mall box of cigarettes, they were trying to say something about that. They also froze on the air conditioner in that movie, and they were trying to say something about both things, but that'll be another video. So when they froze on the street signs, they were trying to say something, and they were connecting not only the fallen angels to technology and to Detroit, but they were also connecting the Crowleyan Golden Dawn members who helped to found Detroit, whose names are the streets in downtown Detroit. And in most major cities, the big names, most of the streets, period. If you look at your street names, they're 9 times out of 10 is somebody's last name. And Detroit's no exception. However, we know in 1919, Aleister Crowley came and visited the Parke-Davis Research Laboratory, which was the first pharmaceutical research lab in America. And Detroit's industry before the automotive industry was pharmaceuticals. What does that have to do with anything? Well, why did Crowley go there? Come on, stretch. Pharmaceuticals are mind-altering drugs. The word itself comes from pharmakon or pharmakia, and that comes from Homeros or Hermes, who your doctors take a Hippocratic oath to, is Hermes. All doctors take a Hippocratic oath, and they take this oath to a false god, Hermes. The staff that you see that symbolizes the AMA, American Medical Association, with the winged serpents entwined around it, they tell you that's the DNA strand. That staff is the staff of Hermes. And even in pharmaceutical use, Hermes, his name is in there. So Aleister Crowley came to Parke-Davis Research Laboratory, which was on the water. And again, being on the water is not willy-nilly. Being on the water has to do with spiritual energy. They understand certain things about energy that we don't want to, and they understand that water carries spirit energy. One reason why people baptize in water or sprinkle holy water. Water is a spiritual conduit. It's not just something you drink or bathe in. It is like gold and copper are conductors of electric energy. Water is a conductor of spirit energy. Dr. Emoto, a Japanese scientist, did many great experiments to that effect to show and prove how if you speak to water, it changes the molecules. So you can turn all of your water into holy water, and I advise that you do it. I do it. Pray over the pipes in your household as well. This is not a game. So Aleister Crowley came to Parke-Davis Research Facilities, which is sitting right off the water. Now it's the Riverfront Hotel in Detroit. Big shot place, okay, to this day. But he went there and he did a ritual. He and members of his Golden Dawn Society, which he was a part of, but he was starting his own thing, the Ordo Templi Orientis. And he was starting a chapter up in Detroit. And big wigs in Detroit like Sibley's and others who I mentioned in the video about RoboCop, the big wigs met with him. And what did they do at Parke-Davis Research Facility? Well, a lot of information came out, and I explained it more in depth in the RoboCop video, so I'm not going to be redundant, but a lot of information came out about their goings-on. And they were even investigated by the feds, you know, as much as that meant at the time. Because at that time, the Illuminati had not saturated themselves in every aspect of society as they have today. And you still had men who were not a part of the Brotherhood who were in positions of power. And so at this time there was still a power struggle between the Illuminati and people who were non-Illuminati and held positions of power. So in that power struggle, some names got named, names got dropped, and some rituals got exposed. And they did rituals here in Detroit, the Golden Dawn. And they had made plans to set up an OTO here in Detroit. So Crowley was here, and Crowley was a lot of things. He was a bisexual. He was an admitted Luciferian, meaning he thought Lucifer to be God. He was a well-studied student of Egyptian mystery systems, and I really encourage all of you brothers and sisters who walk around with ankhs around your necks and who revere ancient Egypt to really take a look at Aleister Crowley. You do yourself a disservice by not studying the enemy. And Aleister Crowley learned more about Egypt than your black butt will ever know. He went there. He read the walls. He read the hieroglyphics. He had access to secret knowledge that you and I can't have, regardless of the fact they were black. So we need to get up off of that, because black pride cometh before the fall, like any other pride cometh before the fall. But if you understand what Crowley was about, it can help you out, and it can get you out of that trick bag of pride, of blind pride. Blind pride is not like blind faith, my brothers and sisters. So we had a working here, there in Detroit, and a working is that's what magicians call a spell or a ritual. They call it a working, and they did a great working in Detroit. When you hear Masons talk about the great work, it's short form for the great working. It's a great ritual that they're undergoing, and that's a great chaos to order ritual. And Detroit played its part as the motor, going through the ritual, a whole city going through the ritual of death and rebirth. So Crowley, drugs, and transcending by the water. Now Crowley came there because drugs are not only about Hermes or Haman, who brought down, and Mark Harmon, who played a doctor, right? But it's not just about drugs simply being something that the fallen angels brought down as a means of manipulating herbs and plants, which is where all drugs come from, that. But it's about mind control, because a research facility, which is what Parke-Davis was, does research on drugs by experimenting on what? Not just lab rats, people. So now you have Crowley down there, okay? You have a drug research facility doing experiments on people, and it's sitting off of the water. Now, this helps to bring some of the mystery behind the, and I'll probably use it for a thumbnail, behind the structure that sits on the Detroit River well, it sits on the riverfront at Hart Plaza, the structure that looks just like a Stargate from the movie Stargate. And it's a very odd piece of art. That's what you're to look at. You know, it's a piece of art sitting at the riverfront. And it's weird looking, and all of the residents think it's weird looking. And people even had some protest about it being there. Same way people protested about the fist being there. They're like, well, how is it Joe Louis' fist? And Joe Louis is not attached to it, because it's not Joe Louis' fist. It's the fist, the iron fist of iron rule of martial law. Again, more evidence that Detroit is a city symbolic of preparations for martial law. Also, why they shot Red Dawn in Detroit, where the new Red Dawn, instead of Russia being the heavies, China was the heavies. And I was in downtown Detroit walking around, and I saw the big tanks sitting there. No cameras, you know. It was, to me, it was a real mind trip, because the tanks was sitting there when the cameras and things wasn't there. So it was a mind control exercise to even have the tanks sitting in Detroit city streets like they were during the 1967 riots, when tanks actually rode up and down Grand River Avenue, which is a main thoroughfare through the hood of Detroit. And my father said that they were shooting at the tanks, and the tanks was, you know, the soldiers was shooting back. But I digress again. Crowley, drugs, and transcending by the water. Okay, so the Stargate art piece that sits by the water is by the water for this reason, because Crowley was in league with demon spirits of the water. When Parliament Funkadelic sing Aqua Boogie, and we did a thing about the Boogie in the Rain Man. Look at that video, you know, so you be up to speed, and I don't have to be redundant because I've already gone over. But I want to stop before midnight, I promise you. But when Parliament Funkadelic makes the song Aqua Boogie, they're talking about an aqua spirit. A boogie was another name for the spirit. Michael Jackson. Blame it on the sunshine. Don't blame it on the moonlight. Don't blame it on the good times. Blame it on the boogie. And if you listen to the lyrics of that song, he lets it be plain and clear that he's talking about a spirit. Kool and the Gang, Jungle Boogie, an African jungle spirit. Well, Parliament Funkadelic was talking about the Aqua Boogie, or the water spirit. And Crowley was in league with the reptilian water spirits, as he himself admitted when he said that he conjured up Iwas. And ironically, our God is I am, and his God is I was. But Iwas manifested himself to Aleister Crowley. He said, I'm Horus, but call me Iwas. And he said, I am the snake that giveth man knowledge. And I invite my servant to take strong drugs. Okay? And Crowley was into taking strong drugs. But this transcending art piece by the water is set up like a Stargate, because what is a Stargate? We talked about star in the video about comet icing and stars. The starting 5 have arrived. Well, star is another word for a fallen angel. A star is another word for a son of God, as found in the book of Job, when it says, and the sons of God assembled, and Satan was there with them. Son, a son, S-U-N, is a star. So star worship and sun worship go hand in hand. So a Stargate is nothing but a doorway for fallen entities to come through. And this is exhibited even in the movie and TV series Stargate. Simple stuff, y'all. We can do this. We can do this. Okay. So it's by the water because it is helping to draw the energies of the demonic water spirits through the portal into the city. It's right at the gateway of the city. You can stand at that it's called Transcending. That's the name of the art piece that looks like a Stargate. Like I said, that will be the thumbnail for this. It's called Transcending. And transcending is one of those double Masonic double play words, because transcending, to transcend, means to to go higher, to elevate, to go to the next level or whatever. In reality, they're saying trance-sending. That's why it's called transcending, because that particular apparatus, that Stargate, that stands on the riverfront of Hart Plaza, the heart of Detroit, is used to draw forth those negative energies that Detroit is so famous for and pump them into the city. Why consider the statue the spirit of Detroit, which when you see Tiger baseball games or any big event held in Detroit, they're going to show you a picture of that statue. It's at the prominent city county building downtown, the Mayor Coleman Young building, and it's also it's also mirrored in the statue that sits outside of 30 Rock, Rockefeller Plaza, where there's a more grandiose representation of the same statue. It's Prometheus, y'all. Who is Prometheus? Prometheus is the Greek myth, the Titan, who scaled Mount Olympus, where you get the term Olympics from. Mount Olympus was where the Greek gods lived. The Titans were half god and half man. Sound like Nephilim. Prometheus was the one out of all of the half man, half gods, out of all the Titans, who had the moxie to climb up Mount Olympus, challenge the gods, steal fire from the gods, take it back down Mount Olympus, and give it to man, thus giving mankind the light of knowledge. So when you see the spirit of Detroit, or when you see the Prometheus statue outside 30 Rock, you'll see in one hand, you'll see the light. And in the Detroit one, it's really scandalous, because in the other hand, which he's looking in, it's a family. It's clearly a woman, a man, and a child. And they're looking up with their arms extended in praise as he's looking at them with a most scandalous gaze. And of course, in the other hand is a representation of the light. Lucifer, the light bearer, is what Prometheus represents. So you have all of these things surrounding Detroit, and it's not just a Detroit thing. It's a Babylon thing. Look at your city and you'll find some of these same things. Well, why do we do that? Well, because it says, be not ignorant of the devil's devices. Our people perish for lack of knowledge. Be not ignorant in a small matter nor a great. To be aware of the wiles of the devil. So we're aware. So just a couple of more notes, and it's past midnight. But I started at 313. Okay. But these we got to get these out. Okay. Kwame Kilpatrick's caricature in RoboCop 2. How could Kwame Kilpatrick have a caricature in RoboCop 2 when Kwame Kilpatrick wasn't even thought of? He and I is a year apart. He wasn't even thought of to be the mayor when RoboCop 2 came out. But yet, it's an obvious caricature of a young black man who's not really ready to be mayor. His temper and his zeal is too enthusiastic and young, and he's being manipulated by the white power structure that's around him. And when I saw RoboCop 2 as a young guy, I thought to myself, why do they have this obviously too young guy playing the mayor? It was weird, because all we knew in Detroit was Coleman Young, who was an old brother, an old crotchety black man, and you could never see nobody being mayor but Coleman Young at that time. Coleman Young would still be mayor today if he was alive. But he was gangster, but he took care of the people, and that's what people cared about. But Kwame was shown to us in RoboCop 2 a caricature, because Kwame's a big, tall football playing brother. He played for Cass Tech, and in the movie, it's a diminutive, smaller stature, but young black man. And I mean noticeably young. Like, why would you pick a man this age to play a mayor of a major city? It was really odd. And everyone knows he was the youngest mayor of any major city. So, why? Well, because this was premeditated. I jotted on my notes, I said it was premeditated murder, because they knew that eventually they would murder Detroit. They needed someone to be the scapegoat. They needed someone to drive the car into the wall for the insurance job, for lack of a better term. And Kwame is a bloodline guy. Yes, his people are heavily involved in Bldg politics. And of course, we know the Bldg is the black leg of the Illuminati, which means we're talking about the elite, the black elite. And that's not to say that they're not good intended people. I believe that his mom, Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick, is a good intended representative. However, they belong to the Shrine of the Black Madonna in Detroit. And the Shrine of the Black Madonna is, for all intents and purposes, a black fraternal order cult out of the Catholic Church, really controlled by Jesuit interests. Because when we're talking about the Black Madonna, first of all, there's nothing in Scripture that says we are to put any worship behind Mary whatsoever. But all that is a code for the Queen of Heaven, which is Lucifer in his feminine disguise. Yes, Lucifer wears drag. That's why he likes for the brothers to dress in the dresses. And really gets off on homosexual things. When you see the Baphomet exhibited, you see that it has breasts and a phallus. So, Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick, the Shrine of the Black Madonna, and the Bldg New Age lie. Now, Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick, Kwame Kilpatrick's mom, was recently, and when I say recently, I mean this was in April of 2012. She was assigned to be the head of the committee, the welcoming committee for the aliens. Did you know that? Yes. Detroit's own Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick. Look it up. And that was mind-blowing to me. I was in Atlanta when that happened. That's why I can remember when it was. I was there in I had arrived in April, and that's when I first got that news, when I first touched down in Atlanta. So that was April of 2012. Look it up. Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick gets the position of the head of the committee to welcome the aliens. And it showed her smiling just as happy. Because you see, the Black Bldg believe that the mothership is coming. Parliament Funkadelic was in on it too. The only reference that you have in pop culture to black folks and a mothership is Parliament Funkadelic. They was up on it too. What was the P-Funk sign? Okay, which is the Manu Coronado or the Devil's Horn sign. So they were into Crowleyism. I know that from studying research of George Clinton. This is my favorite, was my favorite funk group. Okay, my man D. Peasy will co-sign for that. Me and him, we're Parliament Funkadelic experts, and it hurt me to my little heart to find out certain things about George and the crew. But they were deceived, just as I believe Carolyn Cheeks was deceived and Kwame Kilpatrick was deceived, and then didn't want to do something that they wanted him to do, and was thus blackmailed and ousted. Or not even blackmailed, the cover that they normally put on you for your nefarious activities. Because they all do it. They all steal money, they all kill hookers, they all do these things. But when they out one of their own, it's because he's not playing ball. So it's something Kwame wouldn't do. Perhaps he knew about the things that was coming down the pipeline. Perhaps he knew about the economic killing of Detroit, the sacrifice of Detroit, the death and rebirth ritual for the Renaissance city to rise again and be reborn like the phoenix from the ashes. And you know the New World Order has a fixation with the phoenix symbolism. Well, so they are good intended people, I believe, but they're caught up in the Love Jones Bldg style, school days status, Spike Lee racism, the belief in black supremacy. And this is what you find in the black leg of the Illuminati. They keep the Luciferian lie going by making you believe you're God, whether you're white or black. And you can find this in the gods and earths. I'm sorry to my brothers and sisters of the 5% nation. But, you know, it's part of the Luciferian lie. No matter how it's colored, noir or blanc, it's the same. So you have the movie Vanishing on 7th Street. Now, first of all, there's no 7th Street in Detroit, but there is 7 Mile. And it was a play off of 7 Mile, no doubt, because 8 Mile had already been put in your subconscious. So we're going to deal with those two right quick, and then we're going to run through some real quick notes, and then we should be done around the hour mark. Do y'all know I intended for this to be 15 minutes? And I thank you for all your encouraging remarks that, you know, you tell me don't worry about it, and I appreciate that. Okay? But I be trying to make it short. I really do. I just can't do it. Okay, Vanishing on 7th Street. Start, and not get it all in, you know. I could drop you a line or two, but hey, I got to do it till it's through it. But Vanishing on 7th Street starred my man who played Anakin Skywalker in the last Star Wars movies, Hayden Christensen. And Hayden Christensen doesn't play a lot of roles. There's something that they say people who sign up with Star Wars, and Sam Jackson must not have signed this part of the contract because he'd be in everything. But if you notice, certain key roles in Star Wars, those people don't play hardly nothing else. Mark Hamill played Luke Skywalker. How many other things did you see him in after that? Not many. Harrison Ford was different. He played Han Solo. You saw him in a lot of things. Well, Hayden Christensen, you don't see him in much. And the things that you do see him in always tend to have a certain occult spin. Vanishing on 7th Street was no exception to that rule. If you check it out, it's supposed to be set in Detroit. Whether it was really shot there, I don't know. But it's supposed to be set in Detroit. And what happens is some sort of spiritual event happens. It's really a puzzling thing, you know, what really causes the events of the movie to go down. But the bottom line is people start disappearing. Left behind style disappearing. I'm talking about cars just rolling down the street. The people just disappear, clothes left behind. And the big mystery is, well, what happened to the people? And there's some sort of strange mist that's going through Detroit, taking the people. I thought that was so symbolic. But Vanishing on 7th Street was also more evidence that there was a spiritual target being put on Detroit's back. Remember, all things done, you know, as above, so below, in the Masonic belief system. So the same things that are going to be done on the physical level, of course, begin on the spiritual level. And we know that because who came here first and set it up spiritually for Detroit to be the way it would end up being? Aleister Crowley. Ironic how Crowley came and went to Parke-Davis research facilities, and Detroit was the home of drug research, and then Detroit would become known as a home of drug dealing and drug selling. How ironic. But Vanishing on 7th Street was more evidence to the fact that something heinous in the spirit realm was supposed to happen to Detroit. You know, it's odd to a place with so many mega churches. You know, it ought to be the most saved place on the planet. Now, geographic location and spiritual significance. Well, a little on 8 Mile. I've said so much about 8 Mile before. I'm going to drop a line or two and then we through. 8 Mile was all about getting your mind set for a couple of things. Racial tension programming was a big part of it. Okay? Remember, 8 Mile came out before the Trayvon fiasco, which, of course, you know, I maintain, as a lot of other researchers maintain, that was all a false flag, and there was no Trayvon Martin. Trayvon's face was a caricature, a mixture of a lot of faces, one of which was Obama's, which leads credence as, or which gives us hints as to the real reason why he came out and said, "It could have been my son." I can't stand him. But, of course, it could have been your son. He actually had your real face imposed in his. So that was more secret society trickery. They pull tricks like that because it does something to your mind. It creates doublethink. Your subconscious mind knows the truth. Your conscious mind hears what it's told. It believes what it's told. So when the two are directly opposed to one another, it creates a split that they call doublethink. And that induces a hypnotic state. Scripture will tell us a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. So 8 Mile was to help set up certain ideas in people's minds, one of which was simply, you need a white person to lead you brothers. and I wanted to say something else, but that's really what it was about. Because all throughout the movie you get this idea of, oh, the poor white guy is getting picked on, but yet he struggles through and he fights his way and he becomes the leader of the Negroes. And that's what the general idea was to give you, because I said after I saw the movie and I picked up on that idea that it was trying to pump out, I told many people before we knew who was going to run for mayor, before Kwame got ousted, I said the next mayor of Detroit would be white. That was part of the whole plan and play. And the next mayor could be Chinese if everything was above board. But these are things that are being contrived in order to keep racial tension. Detroit is a very segregated place. When I visit Mansfield, Ohio, I'm amazed at how many mixed people that I see and how I see black and white living together. I don't see that in Detroit. On the other side of 8 Mile is primarily where white people live, and that's another reason why they called it 8 Mile. Eminem didn't even stay off of 8 Mile when he stayed in Detroit. And let's get that on here too, because I got videos about it. I won't go into it. Eminem is not from Detroit, neither is Kid Rock, but they needed the moniker or the credibility, the street credibility of being able to say they was from Detroit, so that brothers and sisters would follow him and listen to him and say, oh, they some real ones. Because that was the mistake that was made with Vanilla Ice before. Vanilla Ice's street credibility fell apart when he tried to say he was from where Luke and the 2 Live Crew was from. No, he went to high school with Luke from the 2 Live Crew, and Luke Skywalker came out and said, no, he didn't. And it crushed his credibility, and it set white rappers back 2 decades. Well, Eminem came, and yeah, he stayed out of bounds across city limits, and he kicked it with brothers that lived within city limits. This is true. And then he moved and lived in the city limits with and around Brother Proof. But prior to that, his origins are not Detroit. He came from Missouri, I believe, and came to Detroit at 13. By the time you're 13, a lot of your personality is already shaped. Okay, and came to Warren when he was 13. And Warren is 8 Mile is the northern border of Detroit, and Warren is the southern border of Detroit. So again, both instances you've got places outside of Detroit trying to claim the name for fame. But okay, it is what it is. So racial programming, behavior modification, conditioning, and a setup for Mayor Mike Duggan. Mayor Mike Duggan is a no good gangster, and you're gonna wish you had Kwame back in there. White flight now becomes white hype, or the perceived need for blacks to be led by whites, as many movies have also helped try to program. Keanu Reeves in Hardball, and They Live, and Rocky. It's a constant theme, and it's part of keeping racial division. Not to say that at some time you won't be led by an Iranian, or you might be led by a Chinaman. That's not the point. The point is when it's a contrived thing, it's created to stir strife. And it does just that. It does stir strife, because when you put things out of their natural order and out of their natural position, that's the natural thing that happens. Strife will ensue. Chaos will ensue. Again, going back to the chaos to order. When you set a people over a people, okay, out of order and out of natural order of things, it's going to create strife between them. They're going to get it on because they don't get along. Okay, there are good hoods in Detroit. Let me speak on that real fast. Destruction porn is a big thing. If you go on YouTube and type in destruction porn, they will show you pictures of my fair city, places I've never seen. I lived there 40 years. I'm 40 years old. Where do they go? They go in the industrial areas that have long been vacated of people, and they take pictures of overgrown grass growing on abandoned cars and things like that. I'm talking about these places. I don't even know where some of these places is at. Okay, they don't show you the neighborhoods where the people live. We live in. I was born and raised up between 6 Mile. Well, between 7 Mile and 5 Mile in totality, but between 7 and 6 Mile during most of my school years. And we lived in a predominantly black neighborhood, of course, but it was middle class and up, where Stevie Wonder used to live, and different members of the Four Tops and the Temptations used to live, and where Mumford High is located, which is the high school that Jerry Bruckheimer, the famous Hollywood producer, went to. It was a predominantly Jewish neighborhood, in fact. And the Jewish people were the people who were the first to sell their homes to African Americans who wanted to move up from the east side of Detroit to the west side. The east side is the older side, and the west side is the supposedly the more progressive side, and that's the side of town I come from. My street, on the corner of my very street, is where Big Sean, the rapper, was raised, and he and my baby sister used to play basketball together. And these is nice houses, baby boy. I'll show you some pictures when I get back home. Nice houses, nice big brick houses, and it's one reason why white flight was such an issue, because it left behind these nice big brick houses to the brothers and sisters, while white folks went across 8 Mile and across Warren to less desirable homes and neighborhoods. Clapboard houses and fold up suburban complexes, as opposed to the Masonic brick houses that permeated most of the city of Detroit. And again, they don't show you that. When John Stossel's, I don't want to call him so many names, but John Stossel, his weak self came, and well, he didn't even come to Detroit. He was probably scared. But when he did his report on Detroit for Fox News, and a lot of you eat up Fox News, you should really be cautious of Fox News and CNN. They're all lying reptilians. But Fox News really pushes the white supremacy agenda. CNN pushes the liberal agenda. Both are Luciferian. Right wing, left wing, same demonic bird. But Fox News did their little exposés on Detroit. And again, they went places where the people don't hardly live. There are a lot of heavily populated, nice neighborhoods and nice homes in Detroit. It's the people that be acting a fool. I digress. But I'm done. We did make it to 101. And I think that's about all that we really need to say. Fox and the right-wing deception, prejudice, racism disguised as Republican self-sufficiency, a fake controlled opposition to the devilish lie of socialism. Socialism, no good. Republicanism, no good. All the ism schisms, no good, because we're talking about a Babylon system that's no good. So John Stossel's fake report had no Detroiters on it except Councilman Spivey, who did the shucky jivey with his bow tie, like a good old boule bow tie peon, and he made us look really bad. And so we just wanted to expose that. I had to start off 313 with that. And I wanted to get that out before 313 was done, and we got started before 313 was done, at least. So look for a couple of more to drop, because I want to deal with some things, some more universal things as well too, and some things new in the news. So I thank you again for your comments and for your views, and I thank you more so for your prayers, and I pray for you that the Most High show you a lesson, it turns into a blessing, and makes all of your testimonies. In the mighty name of Jesus, I bid you shalom.